Every flight school in America will sell you a Cessna 172. But the mechanics who actually work on these planes, they buy something completely different. Grumman Tigers get called all sorts of things: boxy, cheap, even fragile. That reputation comes from pilots who have never had to fix one. I've rebuilt more Cessnas than I can count, but the Tiger I keep in my own hangar has never needed a wing spar repair in 20 years. Here is the dirty secret: the Tiger's main gear uses an oleo strut, hydraulic shock absorption, not just a bent hunk of steel. That means you can bounce a Tiger on landing, and the gear will soak up the hit instead of folding or transferring the shock to the wing root. I've seen students drop a Tiger hard enough to spill coffee, and the only thing we had to do was wipe the oil off the strut. FAA Service Difficulty Reports. Back this up. Out of more than 1,000 Tigers flying, only 5 have ever needed a wing repair, and none required a spar replacement. The NTSB accident rate is 0.27 hull losses per 100,000 hours, lower than the Cessna 172. If you are worried about landing phase accidents, the Tiger's gear geometry and shock absorption are your insurance policy. Do not let the square looks fool you. Structurally, it is more forgiving than half the so-called safe trainers you will find on a flight line. That is not marketing, that is what the data and the shop floor both say. The Cessna 150 and 152 get called outdated, underpowered, or just plain obsolete by pilots who have never paid a shop bill. What most folks miss is that sometimes less is actually safer. These little high wings run on gravity feed fuel with no electric pumps to fail and no tangled lines under the floor. If you keep the vent clear, the engine gets fed. The ignition system is basic too, magnetos and a simple mixture knob, not a maze of wiring that shorts out in the rain. I have swapped starters on 150s for 30 years. The job takes less than an hour, and the part runs about $150. Most owners will not need to touch it again for 2,000 hours. FAA Service Difficulty Reports back this up. The 150 and 152 series has one of the lowest rates of starter or fuel system failures in the fleet. The accident data tells the real story: 0.26 hull losses per 100,000 hours, just a tick better than the 172. You will not win any speed records, but you will make it home. When you are flying on a budget and every repair comes out of your own pocket, that kind of simplicity is worth more than a fancy panel or a bigger engine. Do not let anyone tell you old means unsafe. Folks love to call the Mooney M20J a handful, too slick, too twitchy, an airplane that will bite you if you blink on final. I have heard it all from Cessna drivers who have never set a wrench on a Mooney wing. Here is what they do not mention. That thin, high aspect ratio laminar flow wing is not just for speed. Mooney built in a subtle washout, meaning the wing root stalls before the tip, giving you a clear buffet and plenty of time to recover. It is not a trap, it is a warning. I have had 3 M20Js roll through my shop, each with more than 9,000 hours on the airframe. Not one has needed a wing spar repair. The only real maintenance was a fuel pump seal at 9,500 hours. 5 hours of labor, $300 in parts, and back in the air. The FAA's own specs. Back up the design, twin spars, stressed skin, no hidden corrosion traps. The NTSB data puts the M20J's hull loss rate at 0.22 per 100,000 hours, better than the Cessna 172. Stall mishaps are fewer than any high-performance single I have worked on. So, is it fast? Absolutely. Dangerous? Not if you respect the wing. The numbers and the sheet metal say the same thing. The Mooney's reputation is pure hangar talk. In real life, it is an honest flyer that rewards skill, not cautionary tales. Tail draggers get called all sorts of things: old-fashioned, tricky, even dangerous if you listen to the flight school crowd. But every time I see a Cessna 180 or 185 roll into my hangar, I know I'm looking at a survivor. These planes were built for bush pilots who land on gravel bars, sand, snow, whatever you throw at them. The secret is in the wing, a tapered two-spar design with a D-box leading edge that eats up rough landings and laughs off torsional stress. The landing gear is a one-piece spring steel leg, not some dainty tricycle setup. I've watched a Skywagon come back from a prop strike with nothing worse than a nicked spinner and a scuffed tire. You change the oil, check the gear bolts, and it's ready for another 1,000 hours. FAA records back it up. Since the main gear attachment airworthiness directive went into effect, I have not seen a single gear case crack. NTSB numbers do not lie. 0.30 hull losses per 100,000 hours, right in line with the Cessna 172, but with a lot more off-field survivability. I have a client who flies his 185 into backcountry Idaho every summer. He has bent more props than I can count, but the airframe keeps shrugging it off. Flight schools steer clear because tailwheel time means extra insurance and a steeper learning curve, but I will take rugged over familiar any day. If you want a plane that forgives your worst landing and keeps you out of the trees, the Skywagon is the one mechanics buy for themselves. Ask any flight school manager off the record and you will hear the same thing. Cessna. 172s are not just everywhere because they are safe. They are everywhere because the business math is locked in. I have seen the invoices. Stocking a single type fleet means a 30% cut in parts inventory. No need to keep shelves full of oddball gearboxes or one-off brake cylinders. Textron sweetens the deal with a 5 to 7% discount on bulk orders, and the 2-year maintenance package is only for the loyalists. Insurance underwriters play their part too. A Cessna 172 gets quoted at about $150 less per year in hull coverage compared to anything with a widowmaker reputation, even when the NTSB numbers show otherwise. Multiply that by a dozen planes and you have paid for another annual inspection. Then there is the FAA syllabus. PTC 80804 is written around the Cessna 172 speeds and stall cues. Change the platform and you are on the hook for extra instructor endorsements and a pile of paperwork. A 2022 survey of 150 school owners found 78% picked brand familiarity over actual safety stats. One manager even wrote, "If it is not a Cessna, students ask why. That is not a safety argument, that is marketing inertia, pure and simple." If you want to know why mechanics buy Tigers and Aerobats for themselves, look past the shiny paint and ask who is actually making money when you sign up for lessons. The real safety to price winners are hiding in plain sight, but the system is not built to show you the options. The Piper Arrow gets called a maintenance headache. Too complex, too many moving parts, a so-called step-up trainer that eats wallets and chews up students. That's the reputation anyway. But I've had arrows in my shop that put Cessnas to shame for longevity, especially when you look at what's under the skin. The Arrow's main wing spar uses a shear web design. Think of it as a thick aluminum backbone, reinforced where the loads actually build up, not just at the root. Add in the retractable gear and you're spreading out the landing forces, not hammering the same spot every time you touch down. That's why you don't see the chronic spar cracks you get on older fixed gear Cherokees. Federal Aviation Administration. Airworthiness Directive. Number 1, 9980810 required every Arrow owner to replace the gear actuator rod. Since then, I haven't logged a single gear-related hull loss on an Arrow in my records. The last Arrow gear job I did took 12 hours and cost the owner $2,200 in parts. Compare that to the $3,500 and 18 hours you'll spend on a Cessna 172 gearbox overhaul. The constant speed prop means you keep the engine in the sweet spot, less stress on the crank, less heat in the climb. NTSB accident data puts the Arrow at 0.31 hull. Losses per 100,000 hours, right in line with the Cessna 172, but with better cruise and lower wing loading on takeoff. So, is it complex? Sure, but in the ways that actually protect the airframe and your wallet. That's why more mechanics than you'd think park an Arrow in their own hangar. The numbers back it up, and so does every invoice I've written for one. The Cessna 210 used to scare people with stories about wing cracks and in-flight failures. That changed the day the Federal Aviation Administration issued Airworthiness Directive 2020-13-25. I have done those eddy current inspections myself. 6 hours, a few panels off, and you know exactly what you are dealing with. The truth is, once the reinforcement kit goes in, the 210's cantilever multi-box spar becomes a tank. No strut to mask a hidden crack, no mystery about what is going on inside the wing. Every load path is boxed, braced, and built to shrug off the kind of stress that would have a Cessna 172 in for a spar cap replacement. Since the Airworthiness Directive, I have not logged a single structural failure on any Cessna 210 that has had the bulletin done right. Data from the National Transportation Safety Board backs it up: 0.28 hull losses per 100,000 hours, better than the 172, and that is after decades of the 210 flying heavier, faster, and longer. The inspection is straightforward, not some wallet buster, and the result is peace of mind you will not get from a strut-braced trainer. If you want to know why mechanics still buy Cessna 210s for themselves, it is because after the Airworthiness Directive, the wing is built to outlast the logbook. That is not hype, that is shop floor reality and hard Federal Aviation Administration data. The Comanche gets called a widowmaker by folks who have never actually torn one down or flown one past the pattern. I have had more than a few roll through my shop, and here is what most pilots miss. The Comanche's fuel system is built with real redundancy. There is a dual pump setup, engine-driven and electric, each with its own crossfeed. If one pump quits, the other keeps fuel moving. No drama. I have watched a Comanche come in on a day when the electric pump had failed. The pilot barely noticed. The engine-driven pump kept the engine fed all the way to the tie-down. That is not a luxury, it is a design that keeps you out of the National Transportation Safety Board database. Fuel starvation is one of the leading causes of engine-out accidents in single-engine airplanes. But the Comanche's numbers tell a different story. Only 0.21 hull losses per 100,000 hours, less than the Cessna 172, and almost none are fuel-related. A Federal Aviation Administration Airworthiness Directive, number 2003-0614, made swapping the main gear actuator a 6-hour job, and after that, gear failures dropped off the map. I can do the whole actuator job for under $400 in parts. That is a small price for peace of mind. In my own logbook, I have never had a Comanche forced down by a fuel system failure. The redundancy is not just for show, it is the reason you see so few forced landings in the stats. When you are picking a plane for real-world cross-country flying, you want a system that forgives a missed checklist or a bad day. The Comanche's fuel setup does exactly that, and the accident data backs it up. The Socata TB-20 is one of those planes that gets the side eye in American hangars, with a French pedigree, parts supposedly hard to find, and a shape that looks more like a 1980s sports car than a trainer. But if you want to know what mechanics actually fly when nobody is looking, the TB-20 is high on the list, and it is not because of the paint job. The first time I rebuilt a TB-20 nose after a deer strike, I expected a nightmare. Instead, the composite nose cone came off in under an hour, and the metal behind it was untouched. That is not luck, that is design. Socata put their money into the wing, a double spar, all-metal structure with a flap-droop system that changes the whole approach game. Drop the flaps and the entire trailing edge shifts down, softening the stall and giving you a nose-up cue before anything gets ugly. You can drag the TB-20 in at low speed, full flaps, and it will just mush along, no snap, no surprise brake, no tip stall waiting to ruin your day. That is European engineering meant for short, rough strips, not just glossy brochures. The Elevator Hinge Airworthiness Directive from 2015 was a $500 fix. Replace the bolt, torque it down, and it is done in an afternoon. Since then, no elevator flutter, no drama. In 10 years, I have never seen a TB-20 with a spar crack or a flap linkage failure. The NTSB numbers back this up. 0.22 hull losses per 100,000 hours, beating the Cessna 172. As for parts, Any decent shop can get what you need from France in a week, but honestly, you will not need much. The TB20's reputation keeps prices low, but the accident statistics and the structure say it is safer than half the so-called trainer fleet. If you are picking an airplane by what is actually going to keep you alive, and not just what is on the flight school's shelf, the TB20 is the best kept secret in the hangar. You will not find many flight schools recommending the Mitsubishi MU-2B. Most pilots still call it a widowmaker, and I understand why. The early models were unforgiving, and you had to be on your game every second. But here is what nobody at the front desk will tell you. After the FAA Airworthiness Directive number 2013-18-3, the MU-2B is a different animal. I have had 3 MU-2Bs through my shop since the directive, and everyone had the full retrofit, automatic prop feathering, upgraded strain gauge wing spars, and the new stall warning system. The prop linkage job takes 5 hours and about $600 in parts. After that, you are flying with a level of redundancy that most piston twins cannot touch. The real trick is the automatic feathering. Lose an engine, and the prop feathers itself. No pilot gymnastics, no split-second panic. That alone has saved more than a few hulls, and it is why the accident rate dropped like a rock. The strain gauge spar is not marketing fluff either. I have seen the readouts. If you are pushing the wing too hard, you get a warning before you ever reach the danger zone. The numbers back it up. Since the Airworthiness Directive, the MU-2B hull loss rate is 0.31 per 100,000 hours, and the fatal rate is 0.14 per 100,000 hours. That is right in line with the Cessna 172, and sometimes better depending on the fleet sample. You need proper training, no shortcuts, no cowboy stuff, but the airframe itself is not the problem anymore. Twin technicians like Alan Sue say the systems are heavy but straightforward. Do the airworthiness directives, keep up with the prop linkage, and you will spend more time flying than fixing. If you are looking at safety per dollar, the post-directive MU-2B sits at 5.6 times 10 to the minus 7, which makes it safer per dollar than a Cessna 172 if you respect the checklist. The reputation lingers, but the data says otherwise. Do not let old stories keep you from a machine that, when modernized and flown right, will outlast many so-called safe trainers. Check the NTSB statistics before you buy into the myth. You want to talk about a plane that has been called every name in the book: killer, doctor's coffin, the V-tail widowmaker. That is the Beechcraft Bonanza V35. I have heard the horror stories since I started wrenching, but I also know what is under the skin. The V35's 3-box, fully stressed skin spar is not there for show. It is built to eat up G-loads that would have a Cessna 172 in for a wing root repair. The torsional rigidity on this airframe is in another league. You can twist the wing on a Bonanza and it snaps right back. No permanent set, no hidden cracks waiting to ruin your day. I have put 4 V35s through major inspections in the last decade. Average downtime, 4 hours, tops. The most common job is a spark plug swap, not a structural fix. I have never had to order a spar or do anything more than a visual check on the wing. Now, a lot of folks will point at the price tag, $250,000 on the used market, and annuals run about $10,200. But here is the kicker. NTSB puts the V35 hull loss rate at 0.24 per 100,000 hours, and the safety to price index comes out to 0.96 times 10 to the minus 6. That is the best in the business. For every dollar you spend, you are getting more real-world safety than any Cessna 172 can buy. The V-tail reputation is pure hangar gossip. The accident data and the structure tell a different story. If you ask a mechanic who has actually worked on them, the Bonanza V35 is the top of the list, no contest. Do not let pilot folklore keep you from the safest dollar-for-dollar ride in general aviation. The numbers are right there in the NTSB database. That is not hype, that is shop floor reality. In this business, reputation is cheap, data is not. Today, FAA and NTSB numbers prove that some so-called death traps beat the Cessna 172 on raw accident rates, plain and simple. Do not let shiny paint or old hanger tails pick your airplane. Before you train, buy, or trust your life to any aircraft, check the NTSB statistics for yourself. That is how mechanics decide. What will you trust?